Hello, thanks for checking out What If New Mexico, a podcast exploring multiple angles and possibilities for people living with a disability, especially in New Mexico. Every episode unravels different experiences to guide a conversation about inclusivity and diversity inside the land of enchantment. We ask, what if it is possible to include everyone in all aspects of life? Each episode will share real conversations with people living with a disability in different communities across our state. We'll stir up dialogue to inspire a future of New Mexico that includes everyone. Join us every Friday for a new episode.
Hello, welcome to What If New Mexico. Last week we opened the conversation about communication. It's a broad subject, but we wanted to analyze how communication barriers, specifically in the disabled community, affects people's access to independency. And not too long ago, it was common to routinely describe people as insane, retarded, and other terms that are dated and derogatory. For our podcast, we'll discuss the choice between disability first language and people first language.
Some people in some communities want their identity to be recognized and destigmatized. In our language, we use adjectives for any characteristics that has no value judgment attached. For example, we say a tall person, not, quote, a person with tallness. Autistic and deaf people seem to mostly feel that way, that they're just descriptions, they're not necessarily problems.
In this episode, we will scratch below the surface to find out why it's still relevant and still contested.
You more or less look at me as a person, not a person that does have a disability and that can do mostly a lot of stuff, but in certain areas, I can't. I think that they want to baby me, and I don't like to be baby.
The term disability first makes me think of what people see, my wheelchair, my drooling. Person first to me means getting to know the person with the disability and understanding the disability and who I am in spite of it.
I personally prefer person first, where you refer to the person rather than refer before the disability. And like I mentioned earlier, I don't like it and feel insulted when people refer to me personally as using disability first, which would be disabled person instead of person with a disability.
I like the people words too.
People
Yes, I like those words too, because it doesn't sound so like downgrading to you. It doesn't sound down. Yeah. That's what I like about those words. It sounds like more like everybody else. That's what I like about those words versus the other words.
Well, I'm more than just my disabilities because I can work 2 jobs on my own. And I'm just very independent right now.
I believe we identify how we want to for ourselves. But I wonder how many people have heard the larger conversation within these communities about the preferences that the majority of the people within those groups have. Because, when I first found out I'm autistic, I didn't hear it that way either. I heard with autism and have Asperger's and so I was new to it then. So I needed to be introduced to the conversation about what language means. Like, to me to say, now specifically, I'll have talked to autistic because that's what I am. If I say I have autism or with autism, that feels like something separate from me. And it's not, it's who I am. It's every piece of me from birth to death, you know. It's a neurological difference. It's who I am. And I think that when we say with autism, there's a underlying meaning that people might not even consciously think about, which makes it sound like it's a condition such as some diseases, and it's been thought of as a disease, right? So that's harmful for people to think of it as a disease, because then they want to cure and fix us. And that's, to me, why identity, it doesn't matter how we say it if we can address the result of saying it that way. If society hears with autism and thinks, oh, you have something and it's horrible and we need to remove it from you, then I say that's when language is harmful. There's other aspects, there's other things I deal with that I don't use identity first language with. I use person first with CPTSD because I wasn't born with that,
Mm-hmm. And it sounds like you do want it to go away. Like it's something.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Or, so I think it varies on that matter, depending on what it is.
To begin to understand people first language, try putting yourself in their shoes. Think about how they get around and navigate to the places they go. How easy or difficult is it for them to communicate their needs and wants? If they communicate, is anyone reacting positively, negatively, ignoring? If the person has difficulty self-regulating and appears different in their actions or what they say, is anyone willing to intervene? I wear shoes even though I am in a wheelchair.
Okay, so you have disability, and that's it, and okay, so does that mean that that we are not one, are the same? So, for me, a person with autism, a person with autism, so you're autistic, but you're also a person.
It's always been hard for me to get excited about this topic because in my mind, you can replace one word with another word and it still means the same thing. And it's just language. It's just words. Language policing doesn't seem to be useful.
But if people change how they think about something, the words will naturally change. So we might instead cultivate a way of seeing all of us as people worthy of inclusion, and the words will naturally become more accepting and inclusive.
And with my son, I feel really uncomfortable when I hear people call him a schizophrenic, or when we talk about other clients as they come in and we discuss different cases that are beginning to come in. I get really uncomfortable when I hear people label the person as a schizophrenic. I know I'm hypersensitive to it because to me, the disability has been a nightmare for my son. He has to curl up in a ball sometimes, just squeezing across so hard that it almost breaks his skin. He is such a talented guy and plays the guitar really well. And he's a poet and he writes songs. And so he really stood out. And then as the voices got really bad, it started sort of taking over. But with schizophrenia, it's got all this stigma that goes with it. And if you just said, well, he's a paranoid schizophrenic, all these visions of other people who have done some horrific things, shot up movie theaters. And often when I hear of things like that have happened, I kind of, as a mother, I just clench up inside because I know it's going to come out in a while that this person has paranoid schizophrenia. and so the assumptions about that are so can be really negative, and that's not who my son is.
When my son was diagnosed with autism, it was equated with the R word. But that was very, very early in autistic days. He certainly was adamant about labeling, was early interest in people first and nothing about us without us. And I mean, he would just interrupt anybody and very in your face about it. I mean, yeah, I am a person with autism, and not just that, or we won't use the R word here, but everything. I mean, handicapped, it indicates you're got your cap in your hand begging. Parking places are not handicapped, they're accessible. They're not for handicapped people, they're for people with accessibility needs.
Even in little things like at work, I always say people we support, not client or patient. It's always, for me, it's always person we support. And I really push that on my team to be more person-centered with their thinking and their labeling. I think even something like that can make a difference. You know, being real with people and telling them, yeah, I lost my husband. It opens new doors and it opens ways to talk about things that people didn't realize they could talk about before.
What I like about that support language is that it sidesteps the question of disability first or people first or identity first. It just doesn't focus on the label at all. Instead, it focuses on the action of supporting.
Some people don't reveal or talk about their disability. Here's Amelia's take on that.
And very seldom have I mentioned my own disability, and just on personal choice, and go back to independence. You have the right whether or not you want to announce your disability. When I do refer to myself as having a disability, I will use the person first language. And even when, yes, I'm occasionally caught myself using disability first. When it comes to other people, I've just met them or don't know a lot about them. I don't feel like it's my place to mention the disability. I feel like that's encroaching on their privacy and their rights. When people, especially family, refer you to me using disability first. I've approached the subject, and it's a hard subject to approach. There's an issue or something that I don't like them referring to me as a disabled child. Sometimes I just let it go and just, kind of brush it off. Remember that when they were my age, that's how people refer to people with disability is disability first.
What if we asked about access and support needs? Then maybe it's not so invasive. In a group I was in, we didn't ask people what their disability was. Instead, we asked, what do you need to be able to communicate? And what do you need to move around? We could talk about what support is needed to make things accessible than rather talking about labels at all.
And I guess there is no final answer to this question. It's the bottom line here. So I hope this has made you think, and our next episode is going to be on work and contribution.
Thank you for listening, and we'll see you next year. Thank you for listening, and we will see you next week.